Thanks for taking the time, man. A lot of people are, asking me, how do you know Kevin Frazier from Entertainment Tonight? And I told them, I said, in a weird way, our paths have always crossed. We went to the same university. You
Yep.
preceded me.
Yep.
We kind of cut our teeth at the same station in Baltimore, learning
Yep.
TV from the same sportscaster, Bruce Cunningham.
Yep.
You were a sportscaster. Many people just see you as the face of the most popular entertainment show. They don't know that your roots are in sportscasting. And now we've always had this path that crossed, and whether it was working at ESPN, you were up there, I was down there, but we were still there together. But the point is, for you to, do this is kind of, I'm honored, I'm humbled, but what has kept you so humble with the midst of how your career has obviously skyrocketed?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're like family, and you're right. We have followed the same path, and we are still on the same journey in a way. I mean, we are, in a sense, the same person coming from the same place. It's fascinating. And listen, I do TV, but I'm not a TV star. And it's funny how people get confused. We're journalists. We cover it. We cover the famous people. We get them to say stuff, but they're the story. We're just kind of like the conduit that, brings the story out there. So it always cracks me up when people are like, oh, TV stars, we're stars. No, we're just the people who tell the stories. And that's our job. And then we go home and we eat dinner. Or in our case, we used to go to the movies, or we do whatever,
Kevin, that's great for you to say, but the reality is...
here's what I will tell you. And this is how I always measure it, right? I work in Hollywood, and it's a crazy place to work. I mean, it is, there are incredible things that happen in Hollywood. But I come home, and I am married to a woman who was a federal public defender. So I'll never forget. One day, I was in New Orleans, and I was mad because Britney Spears was late for our interview. She was like an hour late. And I was like, I'm going to miss my flight. This is terrible. And then my wife said, I'm standing at a garbage can, and I'm looking at a murdered woman's bloody clothes. So you good? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to go back and sit in the air conditioning and wait for Britney Spears to show up and stop being a little,
Yeah. So that kind of put it all in perspective.
And that puts it all in perspective. And that's what it really is about. I mean, it's about doing your job, living your life, being with your family, and enjoying it. And I love what I do, but what I do does not define me. Like you said, there are a lot of people out there who don't even realize that I did sports. It's weird when they say that to me. They're like, you did sports? And I was like, yeah, I'm a sports guy. My dad was a basketball coach. I'm about sports.
Yeah, your dad was the coach on the team that won the Division II national title at Morgan State University, led by the great Marvin, the human eraser Webster. Yeah. So that's your roots. Yeah. But a lot of people now that they will know that you did sportscasting, how do you go from doing that to what you do now? I know there's no blueprint. You got to have amazing talent. And a lot of people can say, wow, hopefully I could do that one day. But there's got to be a point where you're just blessed. You're blessed because you worked hard. You're blessed because you're talented. But how do you go from that to doing, the Hollywood A-lister scene? How does that happen?
A long time ago, I read this Rick Pitino book, and he said, people are always ready for stuff, but they're not that often prepared. And so it's about preparing yourself for something. Because I look back at my first job, which was Charleston, South Carolina, where I was a cameraman. And I went there and I thought I was ready. I was nowhere prepared, almost got fired the first day. It was so lucky that I made it through the first day. It was a miracle that I made it through the first day. Shout out Shelly Smith, who wanted me out the door. I love you. But it's crazy because you have to be prepared. And I think that, you talked about, we worked in Baltimore together. We were both really well prepared because you've been able to go back and forth to news or sports or whatever. And it's different disciplines, but it is telling great stories. And we both, I think, know how to tell stories. And that's what entertainment is just like sports, and sports prepares you, I think, for entertainment, because there is nothing like the red carpet, but there's nothing like sports, where you have to know facts and figures in your head at the drop of a hat. You know how it is when you're at ESPN and you get a wrong player position, or that somebody passed for 450 yards when they passed for 215. You go back to your desk and somebody's waiting for you, or a call is waiting for you, and they're like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're crazy. So sports really prepared me so well for entertainment, but it is telling stories about people in both instances.
But now, how do you go from what I'm interested
Okay.
in, and I've never had the chance to ask you personally,
Yeah.
how do you go from, even though you had a Rolodex that was unbelievable on the sports athletic side, how do you go from interviewing those types, where to us, those are the A-listers?
Yeah.
Now you go to interviewing the A-listers, the Will Smiths, the Tom Cruises, the Brad Pitts, the Angelina Jolies, the Meryl Streeps, the Oprah Winfreys, the presidents. How do you go from that to that?
Because they're all the same. Because all athletes love entertainers. All entertainers love athletes. Like, they love athletes. And so it's interesting, because you can sit down and have a conversation about Kobe with Denzel Washington. When you walk in and you're going to do an interview with Denzel Washington, you also have to take a second to talk about the Lakers, because he sits courtside and he wants to talk about the Lakers. And he wants to know what's going on. You know, I'll never forget going in and doing a junket, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but anyway, doing a junket, and one of the guys, all he wanted to do was talk about English soccer, and his PR people were so annoyed. He gave me a great interview about his movie and everything else, but he wanted to talk about Tottenham and their rise and how they were coming back. And because we talked about that, he was so excited. I mean, I remember going and sitting down with Keanu Reeves, and Keanu Reeves, I was like, well, what is he going to want to talk about? And he wanted to talk about the fight in the Palace when Ron Artest went into the stands. And so we talked about that for 20 minutes before we even got into the movie. So it's interesting that people love sports, and sports people love entertainment. And I'll never forget, first time they sent me out, when I got to Entertainment Tonight, they sent me out and they said, hey, you're going to do the NAACP Image Awards. And I was like, great, that'll be fantastic. And they said, most importantly, there's this guy, he's a senator from Illinois. He's going to stop and we're going to get an exclusive with him, because he could do big things one day. And I was like, yeah, that Obama dude. And he walks over, and Barack Obama's first thing was like, Kev, I used to watch you on Sports Center. And so the people from the entertainment world are like, what? And, and you can't kind of explain that to them, because they're in their little bubble and they don't understand that entertainers love sports. So it was an easy transition for me, because people watched Sports Center, which we both did.
So what is it that prepares you when you walk into, an A-lister's house or an A-lister's arena, so to speak? How do you prepare for that? What is it that you're seeking to do? How do you get yourself to a point where you can walk in and have that level of comfort? Because you're their peer. Where we all idolize these people, you are their peer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing is you have to understand that they are there to do, there's a project, there's a record, there's a movie, there's something they're promoting, right? And so let's understand what is interesting about that, but also to humanize those folks. And it's just like with basketball or football. If you were going to interview Shaq, you could not walk in and not know Shaq's free throw percentage, not know what he's doing down low. You have to understand what's going on, the dynamics between he and Kobe on the team. You have to understand what's going on outside of the world, what Shaq is doing in the entertainment space. So we would digest all that information. And that really helped me for entertainment, because that's what I try to digest so much information that I go in. And a lot of times I get so angry with myself, and I'm like, I just sat up till 3 a.m. reading this book or that thing, and we didn't even talk about it. We didn't even have enough time to get into all that stuff. But I think you always have to be prepared, not ready, but prepared.
Who's the one person that still living?
Yeah.
I know of all your interviews, your list is innumerable, but who's the one person that you still haven't interviewed, but that would be your wish list?
I know this is going to sound crazy because we've interviewed I've had a chance to interview so many folks. And there are times where I literally, like we're watching TV or something, and I'm like, oh my God, I did interview them. Oh my goodness, we did do this with that person. Or, we've come across so many folks. And so I think that when it comes to interviews, it's never who you really want. It's the person who's going to always surprise you. And when I say that, I mean, when Johnny Carson died, they sent me to go interview Paul Anka. And it was late at night, and they were like, yeah, you got to go interview Paul Anka because he wrote the Tonight Show theme. And I was like, come on, y'all, for real? Are we going to use, we're going to use this you're going to use Paul Anka. Okay, all right, I'm going to go to Paul Anka's house. Sit down, start talking to Paul Anka. And then Paul Anka is like, hold on, let me get some wine. I ordered some food. Let's talk about the Rat Pack. I'm going to tell you about when Ali used to come to my shows and sit in the front row and sing every song, every word to every song. My days with Sinatra, all this stuff. And I'm like, yo, this is the greatest interview ever. So you never know you never know what's going to be around the corner when you meet somebody, and you never know who's going to be great and who's going to be really bad. So it's like, I can't say that there is one person out there that I'm dying to get, because tomorrow I may go and interview some little girl who's a fifth character on a show, but she's so damn good that you walk away like, that was the best interview I've ever done in my life.
So when's the one time, whether it's recent or back in the day, because I imagine at this point you're just unfazed by, whoever it is. When's the one time where you had to say, man, I'm sitting in front of so-and-so, where you had to pinch yourself?
That kind of stuff happens all the time. That happens. The other day I did a Zoom with Ringo Starr, and I was like, I'm Zooming with Ringo Starr. Like, he was in the epicenter of all, like, the Beatles madness. There was one time I was in the garden of the White House walking with Michelle Obama, and she was showing me the different stuff in the garden she had planted. And I stopped and I was like, this is crazy. I was like, what, how did we get here? And there are times where that happens all the time, where I stop and I look around and I say, how the hell did you get here? How did this moment happen? And I always try to sit down and I appreciate those moments. And I say, maybe this is the last interview. Maybe this is the last contract. Maybe this is the last time around. And I just want to appreciate this moment. I want to soak in that I'm standing in Berlin with Charlize Theron overlooking the Brandenburg Gate, and we're having a chat, and she's asking me about what school my kids go to. Or I'm in New Orleans, with my arm around Halle Berry, and we're chatting about, workout stuff, just standing there. There are so many times where I'm just like, this is crazy. How in the hell did we get here? It's always amazing. So I pinch myself a lot. But even when I was in sports, I'll never forget that one of the times that I was most excited when I was in sports is I was covering the All-Star game in DC, and I look across the court and I'm looking and I see Allen Iverson, there's Jordan, there's a couple other people, and behind them, I see Ken Chenault, who is the CEO of American Express. And I'm like, oh my God, there's Ken Chenault. And it's crazy when you run across the court at the All-Star game. And I ran across the court at the All-Star game to go over and shake Ken Chenault's hand. So I think there are different people at different times that you meet and you see, and you're like, oh my God. But I admire him so much, because here's this African-American man who he helped build this company into the monster it is today. It was there before, but he really turned it into a global monster. And I was just like, what you've done, how you succeeded, is so much more than people understand. So I think there are people that you interact with all the time that you're like, my God, I'm just blown away by this person.
Speaking of African-American, how much pride do you take in being the face of the most popular entertainment program in the world, and you are African-American?
There is not a day that doesn't go by that I drive through the gates and I think about it. And I think about my grandfather, simple man who lived his whole life in Charleston, South Carolina, didn't go to college because he wanted to stay there and support his family. And he was able to do well for his family by not going to college, but by continuing to work. And I know what it would have meant to him because he always explained that to me. His sister, who is considered the godmother of the civil rights movement, Septima Poinsett Clark, who, she started a thing called the Highlander School, and she trained Rosa Parks. And all those people, every day when I walk into work, I stop and I think about them, and I think about what they had to go through and what happened to them and what they couldn't do, and now what I am able to do. And I have to take that in and kind of soak it up and appreciate it and just say, my goodness, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, and I thank them so much. When I went to Barack Obama's inauguration, as I was walking in and I was looking at Mile High Stadium and understanding what that day was, I just kept thinking of them because I thought, this is what they were all pushing and fighting and waiting for, this thing. And here it is, and here I am, the one who gets to go in. And not only do I get to go in, I'm going to cover it. I'll see Obama. I'll see Oprah, I'll see all these people. And I'm like, this was what they sacrificed for. You can't mess this up. You go in because they sacrificed a lot to make this happen.
Who's the bigger level of diva? The athletes that we hold on the pedestal or the Hollywood A-listers?
There are some on both sides. There are some that will shock you. There are people who you're like, really? And just like and we had that in sports too, where you're like, really? We're just talking about a game, bruh. Let's just have the conversation. I'm gonna do my job, you do yours. And it's the same with some people in entertainment. You're like, we're just talking about a movie. I'm gonna do my job, you do yours, and we can both make money here, okay? Let me help you. And so it trips me out when people get a little sideways, but I think it's on both sides. I think there is a little bit on both sides. And I mean, look, we both knew. Like when we were at Sports Center, there were certain people that you would mention them and everybody would be like, oh, wow, yeah. Ooh, good luck with that one, bro. Good luck. You know that.
So what's the weirdest request? Without outing people, without naming names, what's the weirdest request that you've had placed upon you prior to an interview?
I think that there are a lot of times where it's time or place where, people will say, hey, I want to do this interview at 2 a.m. in the morning. And you're like, what time? They're like, yeah, 2 a.m. And you're like, huh? 2 a.m. And they're like, yeah, 2 a.m. Or there are times where people just want, like when you come in and they're like, oh, well, you can only ask me this. And we're like, well, we're not coming in then if we can only ask you that. I mean, that's ridiculous. But for the most part, people, because you have to, when they make those crazy requests, you have to go back and say, that's a crazy request. Let's back up and let's rethink this. Let's start over again. You know how that is. Like when you're like, stop, hold on, stop for a minute. We're better than that. Let's try it again. Come on now. So that's what really happens a lot of times with the crazy requests.
In terms of, the Black Lives Matter movement and the awful, killing and for lack of better terminology, just the senseless murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
How have you been impacted by that? How do you feel Hollywood's been impacted by that?
Hollywood is going to change forever. Hollywood has changed forever. Now, I went to Minnesota for George Floyd's funeral, and the first of the three. And it was powerful because my wife's from St. Paul. So I'm in Minneapolis all the time. I go to the State Fair every year. I know that city. And so what I saw was that it wasn't mainly African-American people. It was white folks who stopped and they were listening and trying to soak up and understand what was happening and how they could be allies. And I think that's important. I also think that this is an important time where we have to back up and understand the United States of America and where the United States of America went wrong. I always say when people look at this time and they say, well, I don't understand, or why are people so angry? And this is, this isn't fair or whatever. I say, let's go back and let's look at our history, and not just slavery, but look at Reconstruction, where the United States actually tried to get it right, where we had senators, congressmen, elected officials, and we really tried to move in a direction of equality. And that was erased by the most dangerous PR campaign in the history of the United States. And that was a push to delegitimize Black people, Black business, and other any kind of Black advancement. So I say we just have to go back and look at how we got it wrong. And now let's get it right this time. But know your history and understand the history. If you're going to talk about Tulsa, then also be able to talk about Wilmington. If you're going to talk about what happened during slavery, then also be able to talk about what happened, the riots and the lynchings in the 1920s. So there's so much there, and there's so many layers to peel back. And, George Floyd was a tipping point. He was the end of what has been, and I can't even say the end, but he was a tipping point in what has been hundreds of years of a campaign to divide, conquer, and stop Black advancement.
Do you find that it's just as divisive within the Hollywood ranks as it is across the rest of America?
I think that Hollywood is a little more liberal place, and I think that there are people who are legitimately looking at how they have conducted business, because for a long time, you would go to a movie or a movie set or a show or a concert or something like that, and you would look behind the scenes and there would be no African Americans. And you would look, at the crew, the people, because people make a lot of money working on movies and other things, and you would look at that and there would be no people of color and no African Americans. And so I think that's the first change. And now you're seeing stuff that's produced that is much more authentic, and they're giving African American voices a chance to tell their story. So I think we're seeing the change. It's happening, but it's going to start behind the scenes. It's going to start with people like, just on Netflix, this new Charlize movie, The Old Guard, Charlize Theron, but it's Gina Prince Blythewood, or did I say it right? Blythewood Prince. Anyway, from Love and Basketball. It was her. She was the director. She was fantastic. She did a hell of a job. But here's a woman who is so accomplished and so good, but she hasn't been getting opportunities like she should have. She should have 10 blockbusters under her belt. She's that good. And she hasn't been getting those opportunities. And that's where hopefully we'll see the change now. And by the way, she did a fantastic job with the movie Old Guard on Netflix.
COVID-19.
Yes.
Like, for the most part, we're sitting back and saying, are they making movies? How do they get back to making movies? What's going on? You're on the inside. Are they actually making movies? How do you make movies during COVID-19? How do you socially distance and do love scenes during COVID-19? What's going on there?
No, it's a problem right now because we're running out of television. I mean, we're literally running out of TV that's been shot, because a lot of things that were put on the back burner, have been run now. There were no summer shows because summer is a time for game shows and reality, and you couldn't shoot those things. A lot of them had to be shut down. You look at America's Got Talent. They're doing America's Got Talent without audiences. So right now, because of the pandemic, Hollywood's in an important time because they have to get back to production, but they have to figure out how to do it in a way that's safe. For instance, the new Jurassic World movie, they just went back to work. Tom Cruise just went back to work on Mission Impossible in London. So the UK is opening up because they've done a great job of handling the pandemic. We have struggled a little bit more here in the US. So we don't know when exactly people will be able to go back to their studios. I talked to Cedric the Entertainer today, and they're targeting August the 15th or 12th to go back to shoot The Neighborhood, his show on CBS. Maybe they make it by then. Maybe they don't. But no matter what, there has to be programming. And that's why Cedric at the same time is also doing these specials, these pandemic specials, where he is doing viral videos during the pandemic, because they need programming. Everybody needs programming. So he may be doing more of those than shooting his regular show, The Neighborhood.
What's the one hobby, and we've asked fellow celebs, what's the one hobby you've picked up during this pandemic that maybe you were either too busy to try or too busy to do, or never even thought you would do, but you find yourself doing?
The thing that I find myself doing a lot more is going back to my roots, and I feel like a cameraman because I'm shooting Entertainment Tonight from my house. So I'm shooting the show. So literally, I have my camera. I have like, I got my mic right here. It's sitting right here. It's, I got, here's an extra lens that is here. I mean, I have stuff all over, another lens in another box. So that has been the thing that has been time consuming, is it's getting back to shooting. So every morning I get up, I go out and I'll shoot maybe outside, maybe I'll shoot in the kitchen, or maybe I'll shoot in the living room. I'll have to set it up. That has been the hobby. That has been my hobby. There's no extra time because we're still shooting this show. I do my voiceovers out of a box right here. Got a little box down here that we hit, and the voice that we do the voiceovers that way. So it's been really interesting, and my family's getting really sick of me. Because I will shoot while they're around, and they get a little irritated, and they're like, yo. And I'm like, hey, can you guys be quiet? And they're like, yo, can you just do your job and get out of the way? We're trying to live our lives. It was so cute the first month. And then everybody was just like, dude, he's shooting again. He's shooting it. Then they started jumping in the background and making fun of me, so I couldn't use the takes and everything. So yeah, that has been the big thing that I've been doing.
In terms of your background as a sports fan,
yeah,
what did you think of the Cowboys growing up?
I hated the Cowboys because I lived in the DC area. Mm-hmm. And so I did not like them at all. And I lived through every time that, they come into town and it'd be Redskin week. Now you have to understand that as a football fan, I'm a Baltimore Colts fan. Think about that. Baltimore Colts, not a Indianapolis Colts. I'm a Baltimore Colts fan. Right here, I keep it right here. Card of the Baltimore Colts. That's my team. I don't want to hear about anybody else. And by the way, Jim O'Brien, field goal, Lassie wins the Super Bowl. They beat the Cowboys. So I just want to throw that out there, and that's what I think of the Cowboys. Yeah.
I know, if I'm not mistaken, you not too long ago, you hosted one of Emmitt Smith's annual charity functions.
Yeah, well, I did some stuff with Emmett, and I do lots of stuff. And let me just say, I love Emmett and I love Pat. And in my new world, really, I deal with Pat more than I deal with Emmett. But go ahead.
Yeah. Of the legendary, sports figures in the North Texas area, who have you bonded with the most?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I mean, look, I love Michael Irvin is my guy. I love Michael Irvin. Dion, also one of my guys. Like, those are dudes who I'm like, I'm ride or die with those two. I mean, I've had so much fun with those two. And one of my favorite Dion stories is that when he was playing baseball in Atlanta, they came through Cincinnati. I was a little Cub reporter. I was the weekend sports anchor. And I went down to the stadium to try and interview Dion. And I'm down there, and I'm in the clubhouse, and there are all these people around him, right? And I'm like, damn, there's no way I'm getting through all these dudes to get this interview. And Dion stands up to yell across the room to get the Nintendo from Tom Glavine, the little Game Boy. He wants the Game Boy from Tom Glavine, and he sees me, and he says, young brother, what are you here for? And I was like, well, I'm here to talk to you. And he's like, hey, I need y'all to move out of the way, because I'm going to talk to this young man right here. And he clears everybody out. We walk upstairs out of the clubhouse onto the field. We get 2 chairs out. We sit down and do this crazy exclusive. And from that day on, Dion was my man, and eventually he ended up coming to Cincinnati. So, I had a chance to hang with him, and then we've worked together at NFL Network. And then, with Herb, I've had a chance to hang out with him so much, and do a lot of stuff with Emmett too.
one thing I know you have the ability to do is project who would play certain, celebrities in a movie.
Okay.
Jerry Jones. Who would you peg to play Jerry Jones in a film?
It's interesting because I think right now Kevin Costner would be perfect Jerry Jones. Kevin Costner, I think, is the best sports movie producer in history. Kevin Costner would play Jerry Jones.
Are we talking about For the Love of the Game? That Kevin Costner, For the Love of the Game?
Bull Durham, Bull Durham, the golfing movie he did. He did. I mean, Kevin Costner. People forget about McFarlane USA. I mean, he's made some good sports movies. Back up now before you're disrespecting Kevin Costner. Back up off him. He's made some great sports movies.
What advice would you give young folks, Kevin? Not necessarily people who want to hold the microphone. Maybe they aspire to great heights like you, and maybe they want to be in the entertainment world. Maybe they want to do something else in life, and it seems unreachable. They don't know how to get from A to Z. What's your advice, a staple piece of advice you give to young people?
So there's this guy I used to work with in Charleston, South Carolina. He was a reporter when I was a cameraman. And every time I see him almost every year at NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists Convention. And he will see me and he'll always look at me. He'll just start laughing. And he'll start pointing at me. And he'll tell people, he's like, he was a cameraman. Yo, he was like, I was a reporter. He was a cameraman in Charleston, South Carolina. The dude is the host of Entertainment Tonight now. And I say to people, it's like no dream is unattainable if you're willing to work for it. And that is something that happened for us in Baltimore, you and I both. I mean, we were little peons in Baltimore working our butts off. And, we had these dreams, but who knew where they would take us? And at every single step, you have to recalibrate and realize I haven't reached the end. I've got to work harder. So there's never a moment where it gets like super easy. I think people think that like there's going to be a moment where you just exhale and it gets really, really easy. There isn't. It only gets harder and you have to work harder until the day you walk away. So it's like, guys, you can attain anything you want if you're willing to work hard and also take criticism. And you can't be like, you have to be a little tough skinned. Sometimes you're going to do things that suck and people will say that. And if they do, it is what it is. And you have to take it. You have to be like, okay, that did suck. Okay, I'm good. It's going to be better tomorrow. I'll tell you that. It will be better tomorrow. And I'll never forget a guy named John Entz, who I worked with at Fox Sports. One night we did our show, me and Van Earl Wright. I sucked. And he literally walked out of control room and met me at the door. And he was like, what was that? And I was like, it was just an off night. And he literally looked at me and was like, there are no off nights. And I was like, okay. And I walked down to my room and I stopped and I thought about it. I was like, damn, he's right. He's right. I get paid to make sure there are no off nights. And that's the thing. You can't have off nights. Just can't have them. So that was what I tell folks.
In terms of your daily, is there a norm? Like, one of the things that blew me away is you texted me at like 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, and you saying, hey man, after I finish with my Kevin Hart interview, I'll get to you. And to me, that's mind boggling. I'm like, wait a minute. He said, I know what you do, not necessarily what's involved, but hey, he's going to give me some time on the same day he sits down with Kevin Hart. I'm like, what's a normal day?
There's no such thing as a normal day. And I think it's the same for you. There's no such thing as a normal day. But also, I mean, Keith, you hit me. I mean, you're like family. So I see this. I'm like, yo, my man. But there is no such thing as a normal day. I mean, I get up, I'll do voiceovers, I'll shoot my stand-ups. Depends on how many Zoom interviews we have when we're in the house, how many times I have to reshoot if something changes, if there's breaking news. There's no such thing as a normal day. And that's what I love about this job. I mean, when we're not in quarantine, literally, I could walk into work and they could say, we need you to be in Kathmandu in 7 hours and go to the airport now. And that's how it breaks. And literally, I come home and I grab my stuff. My children look at me and they say, you're leaving again? And I'm like, yeah, I'm leaving. And I go to the airport and I go. That's the beauty of it. There is nothing that is ever the same, ever.
Of all your relationships,
Yep.
which relationship are you most proud of?
The relationship with my children and my wife. That's probably the most important thing to me in the world, because I mean, those are the people who mean the most to me. And so I love, people wonder like what, there's all this Hollywood stuff to do. And what are you doing on the weekends and hanging out? On the weekends, I get in my minivan and I drive to games. In the afternoons, I come home and I rebound baskets, or I kick soccer balls, or or I'm coaching a team or something like that, or we're just hanging out and we're playing games. Those are the things that are most important to me. So people, it's funny because people always be like, "You going to that party tonight?" And I'll be like, "Nah, man, we got a game in San Bernardino tomorrow with my 10-year-old soccer team. I gotta be up driving at 6 a.m. in the minivan." So that's what I'm proudest of. Like, if you ask me what is the thing that I enjoy the most, 100%, it's my family.
When you most people would think, and these are probably misnomers,
Mm-hmm.
but most people would think you have this. I know you have a team that works with you, but most
Yeah.
people think, the people that we see on that level, they have hundreds of people lining up these interviews, and they just show up and they do their thing.
Well, okay, so let me say this. Here, there is a hierarchy in Hollywood of how things work, but we make, when news breaks or anything happens, we make a lot of calls. We're talking to folks, but listen, at Entertainment Tonight, this is where you get to you're with the big boys, like you're with the big boy league, where you're like, you have the best of the best. So our movie person knows every movie person. But at the same time, like, talking to Kevin today, I know Kevin, okay? I know Kevin's, his publicist and his team. I know all those folks. So we have conversations too. So when things are going on, I'm working with them. When stuff happens for Will and Jada, yes, I'm talking to their people. But so are our producers. So it really is a collaborative effort, but it is a lot of phone calls. It's a lot of reading, writing, emails. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this.
Can you pick up the phone? And I know this is a question I've been asked.
Yeah.
Can he pick up the phone and just call so-and-so or so-and-so and so-and-so and say, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. Let's grab some coffee. Let's go to the driving range." Does it work like that?
You can pick up the phone and say that, but so here's the thing that I feel with a lot of the celebs in Hollywood. I want you to go home and go spend time with your family. So if I'm going to go golf, I may, like today, Cedric the Entertainer, I'm like, "Said, hit me. I didn't know you could go out and golf now." He's like, "I'll hit you. We'll go golf." Okay, great. So we'll go golf and we'll hang out. And there are those opportunities, and you can do that. It's just, you don't want to abuse that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to abuse that. Like, there are certain big stars that I see that their kids go to the same school as my kids. We'll sit together at the Winter Sing, and but I'm not going to try and, then be like, "Yo, let's go out." Honestly, I don't really want to go out with y'all. I want to go to my 10-year-old soccer game, or I want to go to my 13-year-old's basketball game. I know that sounds crazy. Yes, you can pick up the phone and call them. And if you really need something, you can get to them. You can. And you can do whatever you want. I'm just of the ilk of, like, we work together, we do this together. And there are some of you I hang out with, and there are others I don't. I cover you.
What's your general thoughts on sports returning? I know you're plugged into all the athletes, and especially the top-notch athletes in these respective sports who are thinking about returning, whether it's the NBA and the bubble or baseball. What's your thoughts?
I will tell you this, because we are massive soccer fans in this house. We are LAFC followers. We, Laker fans, but we're also huge LAFC fans. And we go to all the games. I got one that's in the supporter section the whole game. And the MLS has gone back, and it has been a little bit of a disaster in the bubble. They're in the bubble in Orlando. They had the entire Nashville team get COVID. They had the entire Dallas team get it. And so now they're out of the bubble. Those teams are out of the tournament. I don't know if it's worth people's health at this point. Do we need this so bad that we have to go back? And I understand that there are TV contracts and entanglements and all that stuff. But understand, if you're an athlete, say you are LeBron, and you are in the bubble, but you have to deal with a person who is coming from their house every night in Florida, which is exploding with COVID-19 cases. They're coming from home and they're going to clean your room. So the person who cleans your room, there's really no checks and balances on them. They're the person who you might have to walk by, who might get you your food, there's really no checks and balances on them. All those people that work at that Disney resort are not living in the bubble with the basketball players. And Florida is a disaster right now. So do we need it that bad that it's worth these guys risking their health? We need to check this damn pandemic and get it under control. Then we can go back to sports. 1 year is not going to kill us, y'all. We go back and look at it was influenza that we had in 1918. Go back and look at it. We made it. 1 year. Give us a year. It'll be okay. We'll be back. 1 year is not too much to sacrifice.
All right. So rapid fire.
Yeah, come on.
They think with us and on our local TV level, there's still people who think, oh, y'all get makeup and a clothier, and we know that's not happening on our level. So I'm gonna ask you, rapid fire.
Come on.
You get a clothing allowance?
We have a wardrobe department and we have a makeup department. So we have that. Yes.
Okay, so that's a big yes.
It's a big yes.
You get a driver?
No, I drive myself most places, but to big award shows, here's what happens. Big award shows, someone will come and pick you up at your house. You go, you change at the hotel right there, and then you go down to the red carpet in your tux. Then you'll go to the award show, and then you'll do the after party stuff, or you'll cover the stuff, post. And then a car will pick you up again, because it is such a hassle for you to get in, park, find a place. There's, thousands and thousands of cars. So for the big award shows, we always have a car.
Personal assistant?
Yes, I do. Gotta have it. My life would be a disaster. Without my personal assistant, my life would crumble. And it's because we go so many places so fast, and things are happening kind of at a rapid fire pace, So to make sure that I have the screener and I'm set for when I land in Berlin, you're staying here and you're going there and you're doing this. And then when you come back on that Wednesday, you're going here and you're doing this. And so, listen, my life would be a real disaster. I'd be divorced again. That's what would happen. I'd be divorced again.
All right.
It'll be over. That's what I'm telling you. It saves my marriage each and every day. Each and every day.
Chef/nutritionist.
God, I wish so I have this lady that I've been working out with named Venus Moore. You can check her out, Body by Venus. She is incredible. I work out with her because I'm getting old and I'm trying to hold on. I have young kids who are coming at me, and that's what that is about. There is no, I have never been caught up in trying to be Mr. Sexy Time. I'm just trying to hold on. That's all. I'm just trying to hold on. Sexiness is left the building.
Couple final questions.
Yes.
Your one moment when you segue from sports to entertainment, you wish you could have back.
Ooh.
I mean, you're the most polished guy I know on TV.
I'll tell you. There's been a couple of them. There was one time when I first got here, and I was here, and who was it that I asked the question? I can't remember who it was I asked the question, and the publicist went off, started yelling at me. And I was like, are you really yelling at me? Because I'll trip. If you want to trip, I'm going to trip. And we both lost it. I know it was Ashton Kutcher inside the Four Seasons, and Ashton got mad at a question I asked. And then from there, it just escalated. And then his publicist started yelling, and we're in the we're yelling in the Four Seasons hallway. I mean, screaming like, screaming. And it's funny because now the publicist who I was like, if I could just tackle him, everything would be cool. And then I was like, I'm done with Ashton. And like 2 months later, I'm at the Super Bowl and I get off an elevator and Ashton jumps on my back and tackles me. And it's like, what's up? What's up? Come watch the game with me. And I'm like, man, I was about to go to jail because of you. And now we're good. And it was a crazy moment. And then the publicist who I was young with, he's my neighbor now. So that makes it even better. Yeah. But it was crazy. And then there was one time where I asked Cameron Diaz a question, and she literally just I asked her about Diddy, saying that Diddy said that you might have been the one girl who got away. And she looked at me and she's like, why would you ask me that question? Why would you ask me that question? I was like, I was just he said it. And she's like, why would you ask me that question? And I turned to Jamie Foxx and I went to ask him a question. He's like, no, you're going to have to answer her. And I'm like, Jamie, you're killing me. And she murdered me for like 10 minutes. I wish I could just shrink and fly away. I wanted to just escape.